Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Colton Ogburn, and the directors of Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars, the Russo Brothers, have just confirmed that Robert Downey Jr.'s casting as Doctor Doom is based upon a direct connection between the character of Doctor Doom and the character of Tony Stark in the story that they are telling. So, when the Russos say,
the one person who could play Victor Von Doom,
they mean it, because the story calls for Doctor Doom to be, or at least to look like, the same guy who played Iron Man and Tony Stark. So let's break down some of the quotes from this interview with the Russo brothers, who not only confirmed this direct connection between Doom and Stark, but we also need to talk about their confirmation of an upcoming MCU reboot and how the story of Doomsday and Secret Wars isn't an ending, but a new beginning. A little later, I'll be joined by my friend Tommy Bechtold, but first, I was right!
Here he goes. I'll let him take his victory lap, man. He doesn't get very many. But while Colton's celebrating, remember to check out our merch store where we have shirts like this, I Hate You 3000, America's Ass, and all of our Daredevil Born Again shirts. Plus, right now we're trying to get rid of all of our old shirts, so we have a massive sale going on right now through the end of the month. Check out the links below.
Sorry. Okay, so ever since the announcement of RDJ returning to the MCU to play Dr. Victor Von Doom, I thought it was pretty obvious that, of course, this would be a variant of Tony Stark. I mean, you don't cast the main protagonist from your previous saga as the main antagonist of your following saga, a saga called the Multiverse Saga, and which is all about the very concept of people with the same face being vastly different characters in the vastness of the multiverse. You don't do all that and not have them be variants. So I was honestly surprised when I got so much pushback on the claim that Doom and Stark would be variants. Many suggested that this was simply an actor being cast in a different role, and that the characters in story wouldn't be aware of or acknowledge the fact that this Doom guy looks like Tony Stark. Which, I don't really know how anyone thought that they were going to do that, but I digress. So, some also claimed that since in the announcement of RDJ's casting at Comic-Con, the Russos said he'd be playing Victor Von Doom, they thought that that somehow meant that the case was settled and he and Tony would not be variants, which, again, I was a little baffled by that, because we have seen in the Multiverse Saga, in shows like Loki, and in movies like Spider-Man No Way Home and Multiverse of Madness, we have seen that characters can share names and have different faces and still be variants of one another, but they can also share faces and have different names and still be variants of one another. Take the many versions of Kang, for example. We have Rama Tut, Victor Timely, Kang, He Who Remains. They're all variants of the same being, but they all have different names, different lives, and different ways of doing things. The Multiverse Saga is all about how varying circumstances and choices can have countless outcomes. And in What If Season 3, we saw several examples of various characters in the multiverse becoming other Marvel characters. We saw Storm as Black Panther, Kahori as Apocalypse, Riri Williams Punisher, Blade Moon Knight, Wolverine Thanos, Silver Surfer Jubilee, Star-Lord Shang-Chi, I could go on. And here's the thing, Tony Stark and Victor Von Doom are strikingly similar characters, so it's easy to see how the slightest change of events in the grand calculus of the multiverse could result in Tony Stark going a very different path and becoming Doctor Doom. So guys, in my research for this video, I had to comb through several articles. And sometimes that can be difficult because you don't know which sources to trust. That's why I use Ground News. They're the sponsor of this video. Ground News is an app and website that gathers related articles from across the world into one place, but they give you the context about the sources' political leanings, their reliability, and their ownership. This means that you can see through the bias and think critically about the news you consume. For example, here's a story about Democratic Minority Leader Chuck Schumer suspending a book event due to backlash regarding his siding with President Trump in the government funding negotiations. A left-leaning site like The New Republic characterized Schumer's move as cowardly, while a right-leaning site like New York Post highlighted this as a progressive revolt and cited Schumer's security concerns. Now, if you look here, we can see that this story was covered by 18 left-leaning sites has 10 right-leaning sites and 8 in the center. And best of all, I can see the media ownership of each article. You see, I want to know that the news isn't trying to sway me one way or the other, and Ground News even has a blind spot section that shows you news stories that each side is ignoring. For instance, here's a story about an anti-LGBT bill in Hungary that would ban pride events. Now, 54% of the sites covering this story are on the left, while only 15% are on the right. So, Ground News is an incredible resource, and I've been looking for a service like Ground News for years. I highly encourage you to check them out, and if you go to ground.news/SC or click this QR code, you will get 40% off their Vantage plan, which includes unlimited access to every feature. This is their best deal of the year, and it's only available for a limited time. Your subscription will not only help this channel, but you'll also be supporting an independent platform working to make the media landscape more transparent. I've talked ad nauseum here on the channel about how and why this casting makes so much sense, and I've made my argument of Tony Stark and Doom being so damn similar, so feel free to check those videos out. I won't rehash them here, but a little later I do want to share with you all my personal theory on how Tony and Doom will be connected in this story that they've got cooking for Doomsday and Secret Wars. But first, I want to check in with Tommy. All right, so Tommy, this casting has been controversial at best, and at our live shows we usually get like this resounding boo when we ask the audience what they think about RDJ playing Doctor Doom. And you know, I get it. I get that it might feel a little desperate, it feels a little cheap, and you know, I guarantee you it wasn't cheap monetarily speaking.
Yeah, right.
But you know, this isn't going to be cheap to make. But you know, I've always thought that for the multiverse saga, having your main hero from the previous saga be your main villain in the next, I've always thought that was a pretty cool idea, especially when there is like a comic precedent for it and the characters are so much alike. So I want to ask you, remind me what your thoughts on RDJ being cast, you know, originally back at Comic-Con. What were your thoughts on that? And does this confirmation from the Russos about this connection between the characters, does that make you more or less excited?
Yes. Well, first of all, Colton, they're not booing. They're saying boom because they're big AJ and Big Justice fans. They love the Costco guys. And honestly, they love Robert Downey Jr., who I consider the unofficial third Costco guy. But I was a fan I was a fan of this from day one. I was at Comic-Con. I wasn't in the panel when it happened, but I remember the energy around it was like, you know, maybe it was a little Phantom Menace-y where it was like just the announcement got everyone excited and then people started to think about it. But listen, I love Robert Downey Jr. as an actor, and I love his, like, you know, his pathway to getting the role of Tony Stark is very inspiring to me. I trust the process in this. You know, I get it. It's a little bit like, how is this going to work? And is this ham-fisted or whatever? But I'm kind of on board with the idea of, like, you're taking the face of the MCU phases 1 through, 3, basically?
Yeah.
Phases 1 through 4. And it's like, you're making him the big bad in a Avengers movie. It's like, I have to trust that the people that brought us Infinity War and Endgame are going to nail this. And I know that may make me seem like a Disney homer, but, like, I'm sorry. I just root for these movies to be good. Like, there's a great phrase in recovery that's like, don't hold contempt prior to investigation. And it's like, okay, you know, it's very helpful in the sense of like, yeah, sure. There's a lot of reasons I can sit here and pick apart with no knowledge of the film, having never seen the screenplay, you know, not knowing anything about the production of Doomsday. There's a lot of armchair analysis I can give, and all of that is fine and good. But at the end of the day, this is one of my favorite actors starring as one of my favorite comic book characters, so I'm going in with a positive attitude.
Yeah, me too, because I get that it can feel like, oh, they're just going back to that well, and maybe it feels like they're admitting like defeat on maybe a not so great saga so far. You and I have liked a lot of it. I've personally disliked a lot of it. It's certainly not as good as the Infinity Saga. So when you're recasting a character or having an actor play like a different character in the same franchise, that's something that's been done before. And while we as the audience recognize it, the characters like in universe aren't aware of it. I'm curious, Tommy, don't you think that it would have been super weird if they had brought back RDJ to play Doctor Doom and we didn't see Spider-Man like say shit about him looking like Mr. Stark, I just think that would have been super weird.
100%. And like, what would have been the point to it? You know, like
Yeah.
we are now set up for these massive emotional reactions from these characters who lost their leader, right? They lost the guy who put together the Avengers with Nick Fury. It's like they're now going to come face to face with him, and he's the bad guy. It's like, that is, to me, the opportunity for drama and high stakes in this film.
Drums.
Yes.
Love drums.
Drums. I love the drum.
Okay. So I'm looking at my notes here. They did this interview with an outlet called Omelette. And part of the report that I'm seeing here is apparently Kevin Feige went to Robert Downey Jr. about this idea of him coming back as Doom. And then RDJ went to the Russo brothers about it. And at first they said no, they didn't want to come back. But then there was a story that McFeely, one of the writers of Infinity War and Endgame, and hell, he may have also wrote on maybe Civil War and Winter Soldier.
I think he wrote a couple of the Captain America movies, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and it's usually him and his brother, right? Are they brothers or they're partners?
Is it Christopher McFeely and Stephen Marcus? Or
yeah. Marcus and McFeely, yeah. So McFeely had an idea, and he pitched it to the Russos, and that's when they got on board. So my question is, what story could he have possibly pitched to the Russos that convinced them to come back? Kevin Feige couldn't convince them. RDJ couldn't convince them. I'm wondering, what story could they have possibly brought to the Russos to make them say, okay, we'll come back? They're saying, there's a direct quote here, like, the question was about, how do you bring him back after we saw him die as Tony? And their response is that we can't answer that because that's tied into the story. So is it a multiversal variant thing? I've wondered before, is it like Doom is dream walking in Tony's corpse or something from Endgame? What do you think?
Well, I have to give credit to Mastertainment MT, my dear friend.
Love MT.
You know, he has been positing on Twitter or X all week that we have been introduced to this possibility of people's souls entering other bodies, right? Through Agatha. Was that intentional to kind of set the stage for the spirit of, or the soul of Dr. Doom to enter, or Victor Von Doom to enter Tony Stark's body at the moment of his death, you know, or somewhere around the time of his death? And to me, that was the first time I had even, you know, considered that after reading it from MT. But to me, that presents maybe the most compelling and linear storytelling way for this to happen. It's like, we know that this happens in this universe because it happened to Billy. So is that what we're facing now, a situation where this like profoundly powerful soul of Victor Von Doom is possessing the body of Tony Stark? And in that case, what does that mean? You know, like, is it?
Well,
I mean, obviously it's meant to be temporary. I don't think we're going to have Robert Downey Jr. in like 10 more movies. It would be great if we did, but it's like, you know, it's probably a disposable method to get to a proper Doctor Doom, you know, an actor that's going to carry that character.
Well, you know, I've always said that if they brought in RDJ to play Doom and he wasn't like a multiversal variant, if it wasn't part of the story, they were just like, oh, hey, it's Robert Downey Jr., we'll have him play Dr. Doom. I would have hated the casting then. I would have been on that team boo, or what is it? Boom, sorry. I'm boom instead of boo, but I would have been boo. I still prefer that they do the variant thing. I think that's the story that they're setting up with the multiverse. That's what's been established in Loki. I like the idea of them simply being variants of one another. But I have to say, and I follow MT, I'm surprised that I missed that tweet. That's a really good theory because, like you said, they set it up in Agatha, this idea of when somebody dies, a soul goes in. I love the idea of maybe Doom's spirit being lost in the multiverse. And
just traveling the multiverse like this wraith.
Oh my God.
It's just like floating around nebulously. And probably it speaks to Doom's ego that only the husk of an intellectual powerhouse like Tony Stark could house his greatness, you
Right.
know? Like, it's like...
Yeah. Yeah, because there are plenty of people dying all the time, but he
Right.
wanted somebody... He wanted somebody special. Ooh, I
Right.
really like that. And that was also set up not only in Agatha. We've seen that set up in Multiverse of Madness in a sense, not the dying part, but with the Darkhold.
The Darkhold, yes.
Them being able to dreamwalk and put their essence in another body. Usually that's, you can put your essence in a variant of yourself, but I would assume a master of the mystic arts like Doom, he could figure out how to utilize it to go into a different body, or hell, maybe they do both. Maybe they are variants, but he died, so he's hopping into his other variant, which in this reality is Tony Stark, but they're still variants of one another. I would like that if they did both and, not one or the other. Like, they are variants, but he's also possessing the body of ours. Yeah. Okay, so I'm really digging that. Full credit to MT for that theory.
Yes,
that is awesome. Okay, so another part of the interview, the Russo brothers mentioned that they did an ending. They told an ending story with Infinity War and Endgame. And they are saying that with Doomsday and Secret Wars, they are now getting to tell a beginning story, which I thought is really interesting because Doomsday and Secret Wars, those are these big Avengers movies. We haven't gotten an Avengers movie since Endgame. So I guess in a sense, it's the first Avengers movie of this saga, so it feels like a beginning, but it's also at the very end of Phase 6, at 4, 5, and 6. It feels like that would be the capper to this saga. I guess in a way they're saying that it's both like an ending and a beginning, and they suggested in this interview, by the way, guys, if you want to watch a great interview, watch this interview that Omelette did with the Russo brothers. It's really good. But they kind of suggest there's like a halfway point, whether that be right in between these two movies, or maybe some point in Doomsday, some point in Secret Wars, where this story stops being a closer and turns into a first chapter of a new story. I'm thinking this is the MCU reboot, the in-universe reboot, like a soft thing. Well, what are you thinking about that?
Yeah, well, I have a tough time wrapping my brain around the fact that a lot of these movies are going to take place on Battleworld. Like, I know that it's this iconic location in the comics, but it's like, to the average moviegoer, it's kind of a tough sell to be like, oh, it's this new world. Like, in my head, I picture, like, it's this giant American Ninja Warrior course. It's like all these, like, worlds kind of patchwork together like a quilt to make this battle world. It's like, well, are there any stakes? It's kind of like wrapping your brain around the idea of an afterlife. It's like, well, is there currency in Battle World? Are there politicians? Can I go to a 7-Eleven and get a Diet Cherry Coke in Battle World? Like, and I know that seems, Doom. Yeah, there's just Doom. There's Doom coin. It's a meme coin, and it's going to the moon. Doom to the moon, baby. I just, for me, someone who, I've read lots of comics and I've seen all the movies and I consider myself a fan, by no means an expert. I have trouble with this, like, why do I care about Battleworld? If it's just going to be this reset. But I think why we care is because it's going to be this kind of soft relaunch of the MCU, of introducing new versions of these beloved characters, or new actors in the roles, or just new personalities to the characters, or new relationships and new alliances. So for me, the excitement in Battleworld is that it is kind of this Garden of Eden, albeit full of violence, but it's like all of this creation of this new universe, and who better to plant the seeds of the next 20 years of MCU movies than the guys who kind of, in my opinion, expertly landed the cargo jet in Endgame. It's like, let's give credit where credit's due. I don't think it's being a shill to say that those movies were fantastic, and no pun intended, but it's like, we all, if you weren't emotionally moved by those films, I don't know what to tell you. Well, I don't know what you're looking for in these movies. And if they can recreate that magic and that emotional response in fans, it's exactly what the MCU needs right now. Because right now it does feel, no pun intended, a little soulless. Like, a lot of the projects have felt like they lack this, like, I just don't care about these characters as much. Like, there are certainly some characters that I love, and even some characters that maybe I don't care I don't feel care is maybe too extreme. I don't feel the attachment to these characters that I felt.
You're not as invested.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't have the same investment. Now, maybe that's because I'm getting older and I have other things going on in my life. Like, that could all be possible. But there's something about sitting through those movies, and even sitting through, Civil War and the first Black Panther movie, and like, there's something about the way those movies made me feel that I haven't really I haven't had that feeling. And to me, these movies, and to a certain degree, the Fantastic Four film coming up, and, not to cross over, but James Gunn's Superman, I have that hope that I'm going to have that feeling again when going to these films. And to me, as a fan, I can't ask for more than that.
Let me go back real quick to your point about Battleworld. I hope, because yes, that is it's a simple concept, but it's also kind of out there. Now, I know Marvel has fully embraced going out there, and it seems that the audience, even the general audience, has been willing to go with them there. I think that it would make most sense to, I love when Marvel goes off the beaten path a little bit from the comics, and they use things that they've already established in the MCU to set up other things, like introducing adamantium. They're saying it was on a celestial. I think that's cool. That's not what's done in the comics, but it's cool that they did that. I think in the comics it was actually vibranium that celestial was made out of, or maybe it was a different metal. Anyway, doesn't matter.
I think you're right, yeah.
I like the idea of the Void being Battleworld, because the Void is something that's already been established. We understand it. It was in Loki, which I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I would assume is probably the most watched Disney Plus Marvel show.
Yeah.
Definitely the most beloved. Maybe up there with WandaVision, of course.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah. That they've established the Void there, and then Deadpool and Wolverine. Everybody saw Deadpool and Wolverine. They understand the Void. And also that ties into, okay, if we're seeing the multiverse die, every universe dies, all that would be left is the Void. So it makes sense that is where Doom would form his battle world. We saw Cassandra Nova in Deadpool and Wolverine talk about how she wanted to destroy every reality until there was just the Void. If they want to get away from the multiverse stuff after Secret Wars and have this new one universe that it no longer has to deal with the multiverse and the multiversal tree, making sure incursions don't happen, what if the Void seems to be impervious to all of this multiverse stuff?
Right.
What if that's the new universe? We see Battleworld become this new universe, and that's how you incorporate all of these characters into it, because they're in the Void. It gets a little complicated because you still have duplicates of others, but maybe there's this big shift or something, and they use reality manipulation. That's where Doom's going after Wanda could come in. He could use Wanda for what we were talking about with the soul transfer and stuff like that, but also reality manipulation, and then that plays into the comics when Doom used Wanda. What are your thoughts on my big theory dump there?
I like it. In a way, it's almost kind of like another Snap, right? It's like if there's this cosmic moment where all these characters kind of fuse into one soul, you see all these variants kind of
that's a good way of putting it.
One being, it's like, yes, that is technically akin to the Snap where we lose 50%. It's like we're losing more than that. It's like we'll lose 90%. If there's 10 variants of Captain America and they become one, Sam Wilson, it's like that is that's a snap to the nth degree. Yet it's not such a tragic snap. It's more of a clarifying snap, right? It's it's an administrative snap. So I like the idea of that. Again, it's just kind of is the audience going to go along with okay, they're going to have to quickly make the Void look a lot like Earth. Is my thought. It's going to have to be.
That's true.
But I like it. I don't think that should be a deterrent. I just think, in terms of, you take your average moviegoer who, probably knows Spider-Man, knows the X-Men, knows the Fantastic Four, certainly knows all of the Avengers that were created now, and it's how do you get them to buy into 20 more years of movies? It's like you kind of got to make it look at least a little bit like what it did look like. You can introduce new characters, new plots, new stories, new powers, new abilities, but the setting kind of needs to be familiar.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean boring, because the familiar settings include the galaxy. As you know, we have 3 Guardians of the Galaxy movies and a Captain Marvel movie that take us into the far reaches of outer space. We have Eternals, for better or for worse, introduced, that we can explore all of their, what's going on in their lives. So and we have Thor. We have, I mean, Asgard is now New Asgard, but ostensibly Asgard can be reborn now with this change. And it's like, there's endless possibility in the kind of rebirth of the MCU. I think that, you have to make people feel safe in you have to make them feel confident, and that they understand where this new beginning is taking place, and how the world works. That's where the world building is so important in these movies. It's like you got to get the audience on board with, this is how this world works. Now these are how the people act in this world.
Well, and my question about the Void is, the more you dissected that for me, maybe not. I still love the idea of Void being battle world. Maybe though at the end of Secret Wars we do see like a new universe created. But my question about the Void is like, we don't know much about it. Like we see the sky in the Void. Yeah. What would happen if you got in a ship and flew into the sky in the Void? Do you leave the Void? Is there open space around it?
Yeah.
Like maybe that area where this. Maybe we'll learn that the Void is like a planet. That would be cool to learn.
Or like
like a planet out there in the universe or something.
Or one of these famous pocket dimensions we love to talk about so much, with where maybe finally Mephisto will be revealed in the Void.
Finally get some Mephisto. And that goes back to Agatha. We finally got that name drop. But I do just want to add, you made the point about like, will the audience go along with this? I think a good way of like being able to predict that is, we have seen like general audiences are very familiar with like the concept of time travel movies, and at the end of a lot of time travel movies we see like the timeline get reset and everything's hunky-dory now. To cite a Marvel film, we saw that happen in Days of Future Past when he wakes up in the new future. I remember being in high school taking my grandma to see that. I don't think she had ever seen another X-Men movie. She fully followed.
Yep.
She understood. She got it, no problem. She's a smart lady, but she's not a big comic book gal.
Sure.
She got it. She understood. So I think that utilizing that type of storytelling and bringing time travel into the multiverse stuff, that is a way to keep general audiences on board. Tommy, I want to thank you so much for joining me. You guys can find Tommy's socials down in the description below.
Yeah.
And Tommy,
Colton, I got to get back to work. My break is almost over.
Yeah,
I was going to say, unfortunately, I got to get back to work. But thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And while Tommy takes his break, I want to share with you guys my personal theory on how they could handle a Tony Stark variant of Doom in this new MCU. So look, I'm not just happy about being right. I like being right, but I'm primarily happy because I think that this is the most interesting way to tell a Doctor Doom story. Making him a variant of Tony Stark takes away the need for an origin story and expositional backstory and a lot of the setup you would have to do in this short runtime up to Doomsday and Secret Wars. By casting RDJ and having him be a variant of Tony Stark, they can now build upon the emotional impact of the story we MCU fans have been following for 17 years. Doctor Doom is a character who is full of himself, an absolute badass, a genius, and he thinks he's right about everything and knows the best path forward. Guys, Doom is a master of the mystic arts in the comics, so imagine us getting to see Tony go through those same trials as Stephen Strange, having to break free from the confines of his logical mind and embrace magic, and then mastering the mystic arts super quickly because he is so freaking smart and a fast learner.
When did you become an expert in thermonuclear astrophysics?
Last night.
Imagine us getting to see a version of Tony who hit rock bottom like Stephen Strange and sought out help to fix his hands. Maybe in this universe, Tony's mind and science couldn't save him from his shrapnel injury and he had to turn to the mystic arts. These are just some of the many possibilities that we could get with this story. And, you know, some say, well, if you want that story, just make him an evil Tony Stark. Why does he have to be Doctor Doom? And fine, I take your point, but my question is, why not? It's been done in the comics, the characters are two sides of the same coin, and all the building blocks have been laid. And sure, the multiverse aspect could be used to just do an evil Iron Man, but this is more than that. We're embracing the idea of how in the vastness of the multiverse, an individual can become a completely different person with the slightest change. So why not have that story reveal that in some universes, this guy that we recognize as Tony Stark, he actually becomes the most menacing and powerful force to be reckoned with in the entire multiverse. Plus, it's just cool. Quit whining. We've gotten Doom in other movies and it wasn't great, and we can have him again in future movies and not have him be connected to Tony Stark. Let's have some fun in this multiverse saga though. Let's have some fun right now and just do it. We can do it now and then we can do it the other way later. See which one's better.
Do it! Just do it!
So guys, I want to hear your thoughts on all of this down in the comments below, and if you're new here, be sure to subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Colton Ogburn.